Hi, my name is Piotr and I would like to welcome you to Privacy by Design for AI Development Cycle. In my presentation, I'm going to teach you the foundations of privacy by design in the AI space. So, my presentation is going to support you in multiple ways by explaining how you can implement privacy by design into software development lifecycle, what are the key differences between various by design frameworks, and what is the actual approach to the AI by design with meeting specific ethical requirements. In this presentation, I'm going to go through both SDLC and AI SDLC, and I will apply various elements of the frameworks into specific steps of the SDLC phases. In the end, I'm going to show you various series of best practices around compliance with various frameworks and how you can incorporate them into your AI software development lifecycle. With these ideas, you're going to have your pipelines highly improved when it comes to GDPR compliance, ethical compliance, AI Act compliance, and other forms of compliance in the whole process of software engineering. So you may learn a lot and it will be highly helpful for your day-to-day routine when building amazing products. Before we get to the content of the presentation, let me introduce myself. I'm Piotr and I mix software engineering with the legal requirements, and I focus on privacy and security engineering. Some facts about me: I have defended my PhD, which is focused specifically on privacy by design. I also run a business called AppSecure, where I support organizations with their privacy and security challenges. I have been in the industry for many years, and also I have worked with a series of companies, starting from small ones to the very large companies, where I've been supporting various processes around cybersecurity and privacy protection. So with this skill set, I think I will be able to provide a lot of useful information, which will be practical for the engineers who don't understand complex legal aspects, and this may highly improve your software engineering lifecycle. So I believe it will be a huge win if you apply some specific solutions, which I will provide in my presentation. So let's get started with the foundations of privacy by design in the AI space. In this section, I'm going to tell you the basics of the frameworks that you're going to face in the process of engineering software. So you need to understand that there will be both privacy and AI frameworks. The privacy-oriented frameworks are both legal and non-legal frameworks, and for the AI ones, the same principle applies. There are EU legal frameworks and also non-legal frameworks which contain a series of principles which will be your guidance for implementation various security and technical measures when developing software or AI software. So let's get started with the very basics. The first thing you need to learn that you will face various EU legal frameworks. For the privacy by design, the most important is GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, and the main act which regulates the foundations of data protection in the whole European Union. And basically, you have to be aware that a lot of other EU regulations will apply, which will be mainly specific to the industries that you will work on. Technically, you need to also remember that aside from the legal frameworks, there will be privacy by design principles and privacy by design strategies, which are the theoretical frameworks around implementing privacy into the IT space, but also there will be a series of norms and standards which will also regulate if your company would decide to follow these norms and eventually get certified. Those will also apply to your organization. Quite similar thing applies to the AI-oriented frameworks. So there is the EU legal framework, which is the AI Act that is like gradually coming into force. And there's also the theoretical framework, which is ethics by design principles, which will contain a series of basic principles helping or guiding you how to manage your software solutions to make sure your software meets the ethical and legal standard. In addition to that, there will be some norms and standards which you may also get certified if you decide to follow such frameworks. So let's get into the frameworks on the privacy by design approach. So for the EU legal framework, we need to be clear that there is no such thing as privacy by design, but there is Article 25, which regulates data protection by design. And that means that in the EU legal framework, all the legal requirements, will come either from GDPR or other legal acts. It's quite complicated to learn and use in practice, but that's one of the framework where you will have to work with your legal teams, your data protection officer, your security teams to get these processes going. But to make some things a bit easier for you as a software engineer or product owner or product manager, you may also learn privacy by design principles and privacy by design strategies. Those two frameworks will help you and guide you with making various decisions around your product, which will heavily influence the level of compliance that you will achieve with your software in the whole software development lifecycle. Those principles and strategies are quite easy to learn, but they are of course a bit more difficult to master. But making sure that you get to follow them, it will make it better for you when developing software. So, what are the main differences between the principles, strategies, and EU legal framework? Well, the EU legal framework is something which you need to abide to. So that does mean that if your software fails to meet the compliance requirements, you're at risk of getting administrative fine, which is quite significant. The theory in this situation would support your compliance activities, so this is why I would suggest to follow the principles as software engineers, so it's easier for you to talk with all the legal people and DPOs, so it's easier for both sides. What about EU legal framework? So basically, the EU legal framework contains a series of rights that you need to fulfill in your software. So, for example, the right to be informed, the right to access, the right to rectify, the right to remove data, and many others. So that has significant impact on your software development process because it will add more and more requirements that you need to meet to make sure your software is compliant with the GDPR. What you need to be aware of that failing to implement such measures in the beginning will make it extremely expensive to implement those measures later. So this is why the by design approach has been incorporated into Article 25 of the GDPR. So you need to plan ahead and implement the solutions ahead before this piece of software gets released to public. So those were only the very minimal foundations that I explained in. There's much more of that which you need to be aware of, but this is a good start for further development. Let's get to the privacy by design principles. This is a series of 7 principles where you're advised to take specific measures and be proactive and preventative, use the privacy as the default setting, also embed privacy into design of your solution, make your solutions in the way that you can achieve win-win scenarios, You need to remember also about end-to-end security in the whole life cycle of the development and the data life cycle. You also need to make sure that you meet the transparency and visibility requirements, so others, the data subjects, are fully aware of what you do and how you do it. And also, you need to have the respect for user privacy, so all you do and all the decisions you make, you need to make them user-centric. So this way, with this series of principles in very short terms, you may achieve the by design approach. To get more information on the specific principles, I would advise you to go and visit my other videos on Digital by Design channel. The next part is the strategies for privacy by design, and there are two groups. The first group is the decisions and the second is actions. When it comes to the decisions, and you can take specific decisions around what that data you will be collecting. So those decisions will help you to decide to minimize, separate, abstract or hide the data. And then you can take specific actions to inform your data subject, give them some control, and force specific security measures or privacy measures, or demonstrate specific activities around making users' privacy the main element of your product. The next section is the AI and by design approach. So in this section, I'm going to explain to you the series of principles for the ethics by design. In practice, there are 6 main principles for ethics by design: respect for human agency, privacy and data governance, fairness, individual and societal and environmental well-being, transparency, accountability, and oversight. With those 6 principles, you may get better at achieving a more ethical product, and having them implemented into your design, into your software development, will make it more likely to happen. So, in the next series of slides, I'm going to explain those specific principles, and I'm going to link them with privacy by design principles and privacy by design strategies, if they will be applicable. In this section, I'm going to speak on ethics by design. Ethics by design is a series of 6 principles. The first principle is respect for human agency. Second is privacy and data governance. The third one is fairness. Fourth one is individual, social, and environmental well-being. Fifth one is transparency, and the last one is accountability and oversight. Those 6 principles are the foundation for building the AI system. It's not only for building, but in my opinion, it's also for the implementation of the AI system. Because AI systems are highly elastic in many situations, so they can be used for some specific use cases that the designers have not thought of or have not created specific security measure to prevent from some specific actions. So in this situation, when you implement an AI system which already exists, this also should apply to you, and you should be aware of that. Please also be aware that ethics by design is a series of 6 theoretical principles, and those principles are not a legal requirement technically, because they link really well into major laws and regulations such as GDPR, AI Act, EU constitutions of all various EU countries, and many other legal acts. So from that perspective, it's really worth thinking about implementing ethics by design principles into your software development process. In the next stage, I'm going to shortly describe what those principles are. Respect for human agency is the first principle which I'm going to focus on. In this principle, you need to create the possibility So the people must be respected to make their own decisions, and also they need to take their actions by themselves. So you can't make decisions for them and instead of them. So you need to give them the full freedom of choosing whatever they want and prefer. So you can't really hide from them what is happening behind their back, and they need to be fully aware what would be their final decision. With this principle of respect for the human agency, you need to know that this principle encapsulates the major fundamental rights, which is the dignity, freedom, and autonomy. These fundamental rights do exist across all EU constitutions, all EU acts, and also they are commonly applicable in various countries. So that's the basic and foundational element of the AI system that you need to remember about. So technically speaking, you can follow the most right approach for building or implementing an AI system in the space of the business. The second principle is the privacy and data governance. So this is the foundation for making sure that your system meets specific criteria of data protection and privacy regulations across the EU and EU countries. So from that perspective, you need to take into consideration that various regulations must be followed. For example, GDPR, other EU laws and regulations, and various country-specific constitutions and legal regulations. So from this perspective, you need to ensure that you collect the data in the correct and the compliant way, and you also process the data in the correct way. And on top of that, you need to ensure that you're fully compliant in the whole data lifecycle. And to do that, what could support you is the privacy by design approach, which is also a series of principles which I talked before, and I will compare ethics by design to privacy by design later in the presentation. So from that perspective, that's the second foundational element of implementing ethics by design into the software which is using AI. The first one is the fairness. With the fairness principle, you need to ensure that all the people will be given equal rights and also equal opportunities. So you can't discriminate people by basing on specific data that you have collected into the system. So you need to also ensure that the users of the system will not be advantaged at all or disadvantaged undeservedly. So you need to implement various technical and organizational measures so your AI system can really follow the basic principles and refer correctly to making sure that people are treated fairly and with dignity. Next principle is focused on individual, social, and environmental well-being. So from this perspective, AI systems should contribute to building individual, social, and environmental well-being and should avoid creating harm. So from that perspective, they should bring value to the humanity and should avoid creating situations where humanity or environment would impose various types of harm. Next one is transparency. So on the transparency principle, as in privacy by design, you need to make sure that the purpose, the inputs, the operations, and other activities of the AI programs should be really understandable and knowable. So it's very easy to provide various explanations on how the AI system works, how it operates, and what leads to some specific results. So it should be able to trace back step by step how the system has created some specific output. So this way it's more it is creating more safety for the people from the perspective of their basic human rights and also from the perspective of privacy and data protection regulations. The last one, which refers to the previous one, is the one where people should be able to understand, supervise and control the way the AI system are designed and operated. So the people involved in the software development process should take responsibility for the way this piece of software would work, and also they should be able to take the responsibility for the consequences of the positive or negative effects applying to others using the system. In this part of the presentation, we have explored privacy by design and ethics by design. And what is really important is the relationship between ethics and privacy by design. So in this slide, I'm going to explain this a little bit. So the first one, the privacy by design, is a series of 7 principles focused on privacy and data protection. The ethics by design is a series of 6 principles, and as you may have noticed, both overlap. So in this slide, you're going to see the idea how these may be connected. So with the slide I have presented, you may see something that looks kinda like the concept of a metro lines in Warsaw, but it's not true. There's much less metro lines in Warsaw. So in here, you're going to see various connections between those principles from ethics by design and privacy by design. What I wanted to add to this is that there's a lot of overlapping connections. So from one principle, you can actually link not only one specific principle to single or multiple value of privacy by design, but also you can link some specific principles of ethics by design to the whole privacy by design series of principles, which means that, technically speaking, ethics by design could actually include everything what is expected from privacy by design. Of course, many could argue, but this is something you should consider when building AI systems. Regardless of your choices, those two things would overlap, or even ethics by design would include whole privacy by design foundation. To summarize the first section, the legal by design frameworks for data protection and AI are fully basing on theoretical backgrounds, which makes these principles fully reusable in the real-world scenarios. So the problem with the frameworks which I've described in this section is that they are not really linked so well to the software engineering and software development lifecycle. And to add more, these frameworks are not linked too well also to the AI software development lifecycle, which makes them more and more complicated to use in real-world scenarios, because you get many more and more theoretical frameworks which don't glue well together with what is real for the developers, which is the code and the process. So my goal in the next section would be to link those principles into specific parts of the process, so you can actually try approaching your software development processes by looking at them from the perspective of series of principles, and maybe consider adding those principles into specific stages of the process that you have. In the last section of the presentation, I will try to give you some examples how you can practically do some implementation work on those theoretical frameworks into practical solutions. In the second part, I'm going to focus on the implementation of privacy by design throughout the AI software development lifecycle. So the main point we need to check first is what is the difference between SDLC and AI SDLC. Although they have a lot of common elements, but they have also some differences. And I will point out the key differences which you could face in the software development process, so it will be easier to pick on the focus areas which will be really important for the AI development cycle. So the main goal of the software development lifecycle is to write the code to solve a specific problem, and the whole system that is being built will be more or less deterministic. For the AI development lifecycle, there is a major difference. The software will be focused on a solution which will be solving problems by basing on accurate data. So that's the important to get specific data set which will help you to build specific machine learning techniques which will actually be applicable in the business environment to solve the problem. The next page is the data side. So frequently data will be user-generated content or even static data. So for the typical SDLC, for the typical software products, the data will be pretty simple in comparison to some other solutions. For the AI development lifecycle, AI solutions are focused on data from various sources, and the key part of this is to have a legal basis, legal reason to have the data, and what is seriously important is to collect the data by obtaining it on an actual legal basis. Still, for both situations, you have to get the legal basis, but for the second one, you have to get the data before you can start using the solution. So on the next side, which is the QA process, the business logic for the typical development process is quite simple because it's being validated through various types of automations or manual work to make sure that some results are really deterministic. For the AI development lifecycle and AI products, you're going to face situations where you won't have any deterministic results. So various inputs may also return different outputs. So there is a risk of non-consistency in the results. On the ethical aspect, for the typical software, you need to include various steps such as risk assessments, privacy impact assessments, and many other steps to make sure that classical software can be compliant with existing regulations. For the AI development cycle, you have to include the same scope of work, plus you need to include also the cases for the future AI regulations. For example, including the AI Act or other acts around AI, for example, coming from the US. So those are the major differences. There are more, but I have selected the major and most important for this presentation. What are the key additional differences in terms of the process of the software development lifecycle versus AI software development lifecycle? There is like one difference, which is an additional step in the process in comparison to the typical SDLC. So for the SDLC, we've got a planning phase, analysis phase, design phase, implementation, testing, and maintenance. And the process would repeat itself over time. With the AI software development lifecycle, you get an additional step around managing the data. So it's data around data collection and preparation, building the model, actually doing the training, doing the tests and deployment, and then making adjustments to the model. So this series of elements would become a single additional step in the whole software development lifecycle. So, to summarize it on a high level, the key stages that we will have is the planning, which is the specification of objectives, analysis, which is the specification of requirements, the design phase to get the high-level design of the solution, the data focus part, which is the data collection and preparation, the implementation phase, which contains the design and development, and one of the last steps, which is the testing and integration to evaluate the system, and in the end it would be the maintenance mode of the system. I will get into the details of the whole process against the privacy by design, and also I will refer to ethics by design. The first step is the planning. So in this phase you're going to define what the system is going to do and what capabilities the system should include. So basically the high-level objectives should be evaluated against the main compliance aspects, which is the ethical requirements, also the privacy and data protection requirements. So from privacy by design perspective and also from ethics by design, you need to get quite a lot of answers around what the system is going to do, how the data is going to be used and collected, what is the goal of the system, what are the potential violations in terms of ethics and data protection. So you need to define the hypothetical, unlikely and also likely risks, what could actually be imposed by such system. So from the privacy by design perspective, you actually should consider preparing a data protection impact assessment and create a risk assessment for that specific system. The same guideline would apply to other steps of the process, because as we go with specific stages of the process, then we get more and more details around the system and we can identify different types of risks. This is why you need to highly focus in the planning phase, and this is why I'm trying to teach the by design approach. So starting from the first step, you're including the most important parts inside the process. In the third step, you're going to focus on the high-level design of the system. So in this step, you have to create a high-level architecture of the solution you're planning to build. So this could also be connected with building a conceptual model. So to give you some high-level examples, you will see that you need to design the features which will basically enable the capabilities to make the system to openly communicate to the users and any stakeholders or any person affected by the system. So you also have to create the user interface with the principles in mind, so it's possible that the freedom, dignity, and other values will be protected by the system. Also, what you need to do is to create such processes and mechanisms that are going to support the decision making. It won't take the freedom to make decisions by the end users of the system. It will still give a lot of control to the end users using it. So basically, you need to keep verifying if defined features and capabilities of the system still are aligned with the privacy and ethics by design. So you need to consider various privacy and data protection and data governance aspects of the system, like users being informed, like users being able to access their own data, and also the users being able to export their own data about them. And also you need to be able to present the reasoning behind some specific results. So building that level of transparency builds trust and builds value for such AI systems. In the second step, you're going to focus on specifying the requirements. So you're going to work on development of technical and non-technical requirements for that specific system. So this would include the definition of what kind of resources do you need, what are the involved risks related to the system, what are the potential costs of the system, and as a result you would have more precise design plan of the system. In this specific phase, you're going to gather all the resources, you're going to compare what do you have available and if you can actually complete building the system. And what is super important is to assess the system against the basic principles and requirements of privacy and ethics by design. So you will have to implement those principles into your basic documentation. So linking this with focusing on win-win scenarios, on focusing the transparency and trust with the end users, you're going to make it easier for you when building such documents. Next stage is the actual implementation. This is a moment where your software solution will be constructed and actually worked on. So what you need to incorporate is a specific set of actions around both privacy by design and ethics by design. So you need to think how to add these principles into various tasks from the start of the individual tasks to the QA process and acceptance process. So what needs to happen is that you need to implement various tools, methodologies, procedures, or anything else to make sure that you can align your development process with the principles and the goals that you have defined. So what does it mean? It means basically that you need to train your development team, ensure that you provide sufficient information and really strong defaults to your development process. For example, if you have user stories, you can provide specific templates where you can incorporate checklists where your product owners, product managers will check the specific story definition against those principles before this user story can be worked by the team of developers. Then, when developers build some specific solutions, they should also be instructed what they should pay attention to and what should be the process around testing specific choices. So if you want to verify if the right data is correctly anonymized, then you need to guide the developers, and also developers need to provide guidance to you what steps could be taken to make sure that data is actually anonymized. Next step, which is also really important, is providing specific definition of done. Then, with this definition and good enough clarity around privacy and ethics by design, you can actually make sure that developers know what they are expected of, and QA team can actually verify against those requirements what has been delivered to them. So in those situations, it's the most important bit to remember about incorporating various principles such as transparency, user-centered approach, also various solutions which support fulfilling the expectations coming from the GDPR, such as the right to be forgotten, the right to log the data for some specific situations, and also you should have an internal processes where your team can submit various problems around and concerns around specific implementations in the system. So building the right level of awareness and mixing this with processes, procedures and methodologies and automation tools could help you achieve great success in this space of implementation. The next part is the testing and integration. It links well with the development stage, and what you need to know that in this stage you may get to a point where you achieve the goals of the functional requirements, but your system could fail at reaching privacy or ethical requirements. In those situations, such system should not be considered as something that could be successfully completed. The main goal of privacy by design and ethics by design is to avoid situations as an outcome, and basically in such cases you should really re-evaluate what you've put into planning. So there could be rare situations where you would take all the activities that would be required to create a system and you would think that specific goals were achieved, also with ethical stuff, but there could be a case where QA team could discover a lot of various issues which would be very hard or impossible to fix. In such situations, such system could potentially fail to be delivered into production. So the end users, which were the target audience, would not be able to use legally such system. So the testing process should also include various types of checklists, various types of guidelines, where the QA team would want to break the system in a ways that potential end users of the system could break. Let's summarize the section. So in this section, you have learned that AI SDLC is similar to the typical SDLC, but it has some additional elements and steps included. So basically, ethics by design and privacy by design and data protection by design go very well together in the process of AI SDLC, and the one can't function without the other. So basically, each stage of the AI software development lifecycle would require you to take a lot of activities around ensuring that ethics by design and privacy by design principles are implemented and maintained and monitored. This means that if at some point your ethical principles will not be met and privacy principles will not be met, then the system should not be deployed and released to the public. It does mean that you have to take various measures to use various processes, and such as checklists, audits, auditing mechanisms, to make sure that your system is functioning as defined in your success criteria. So what you could focus on is to be some sort of hacker to discover potential misuse, and by trying to replicate what your users would try to do with the system. And frequently they can discover a lot of non-typical issues, which is extremely important for the long-term success of such developments. So the last step is connected to the maintenance and deployment of the system. So there are two methods to actually enable the system to the public. First one is done by the company or organization which has created the system and intends to release it to the wider audience. That's the first situation that frequently happens. But also there's a case where other organizations could actually purchase the system that has been created by the other organization, and there's intention to enable this for their end users. This also involves and requires to take the ethical and privacy by design approach to make sure that the chosen system would meet the ethical requirements and privacy requirements and other compliance requirements. So from this perspective, additional steps would have to be taken to do various risk assessments, ethical assessments on the impact of such solution inside this specific environment. Next, when the system is deployed, it requires regular monitoring and various processes around submitting incidents where anyone could submit the misuse, incorrect behavior of the system, or various errors which could always happen in the space of AI. So that's the last stage, and after this, the cycle could repeat because the systems grow over time. It's not a one-off approach where you do a waterfall approach to create one system and leave it for a very long time. You expect to get that system updated and delivered with new features, new solutions, and new ideas into your target group. So that's all on the process side. In this part, I will focus on the super simple guide on the simple practices and real-world applications so you can support your ethics by design or privacy by design programs for AI development cycles. So starting with the people, which is the most important part of the organization. So please remember to educate and train your team on both ethical design and the privacy or data protection by design. This means that your team can gain the sufficient knowledge to be able to identify various problems in the development process of the AI solutions. Then you can also educate your team on the potential threats and risks to the individuals that could be implied by incorporating AI solutions into their lives. So you should also try to teach to focus in a way so your team can break the AI system, so you can learn how to build correctly the safety measures against incorrect use of the AI system. This also refers to the empowerment. So your team basically should be empowered in multiple spaces. Firstly, you should have your ethics officer and also data protection officer appointed. It is worth also introducing ethical champion, privacy champion programs, where there will be specific people also responsible for maintaining and managing privacy and ethical efforts. You also should be able to give them enough empowerment so they can actually provide serious insights into your whole software development lifecycle. So this way you can ensure that your products can be designed without any significant compliance issues or without issues at all. The next way is to implement processes. So by doing this, you should create a way to control and support what is going on in your organization around AI products. So you should perform regular checks, tests, assessments, and audits on the AI systems so you can ensure that they always follow the ethical and privacy standards that were defined by the legal frameworks and also additional internal frameworks. You should also make sure that your team would know how to perform QA process on AI systems. There should be new ways of testing AI systems and reporting various deviations or anomalies of such system, so you could figure out the way to handle the way to... Next bit is the process side. In this part, you should also focus on making sure you can control and support your teams around building the AI systems. What you should do and what you should include is the regular tests, assessments, and audits on the AI system so you can make sure that they adhere to both internal, ethical, and privacy standards, and also, which is the most important part, to the legal frameworks that exist in the country or continent where the laws and regulations apply. As a next step, you should be able to ensure that your QA team would know how to test AI systems. You should also focus on finding various ways of testing and reporting deviations or anomalies, and not only reporting but also handling those. So, on the support side, you should implement processes around whistleblower programs where you can submit various um, remarks on your AI solution. So, those should be referring to ethical aspects and privacy aspects or any other compliance related elements. You should always remember about recognizing and rewarding the right behavior within the organization to promote a positive reinforcement culture for activities around ethics, privacy, security, and other compliance efforts. The last part is the policy side. You should also have various policies implemented which define what is allowed and what is not allowed within some specific development processes or systems. You should have specific code of conduct that will align with data protection, AI regulations, privacy laws, and other laws and regulations that apply to your organization and to your product. You should repeat all the cycles, so it's not a one-off effort. You should continuously train your team, provide them the right tools for the job, and review and update your policies, guidelines, so you can keep your processes and system up to date as the tech in the space evolves. You should also consider rotation of the charge for reviewing your documents so you get new perspectives on the way your privacy and ethical efforts are made. To summarize the presentation, what you have learned today is a series of theoretical and practical guidelines how you can manage privacy by design and ethics by design for both software development lifecycle and AI software development lifecycle. What you have learned in this presentation is the key difference between AI SDLC and classical SDLC. So you found the core differences, and on top of that, the core additional activities you would have to take to make sure that your project may become successful. With this information, you will be able to apply various activities around people, processes, and policies inside your organization. This will lead to better levels of compliance and better potential of success of your project due to the full compliance possibility when you could actually get to non-compliance without applying such principles to your SDLC and AI SDLC. To summarize, this is going to be helpful for your business, and with those guidelines and principles and with what I have provided today, you could take something with you, which is a homework. I would like to give you one simple homework to review your SDLC and AI SDLC processes and seek if they have implemented any controls or principles so your team pays attention to them. With this homework, you're going to get so much more value out of this presentation than just by watching it. So action is the key to success. Thank you for watching, and I would like to invite you to my website appsecure.com or YouTube channel Digital by Design, so you can actually find more information about me and additional content which could help your software development lifecycle. Thank you.